three ideas behind what the cloud computing is. Cloud computing is a model where we have on-demand access to a shared pool of configurations and configurable computing. And these resources can include things like computer resources, so processors, memory, CPU, those sorts of things. We also have networking resources, so the ability to be able to communicate with computers around the world and in other tenants within the Azure platform. We have storage, so a huge amount of storage capabilities that allow us to keep data into the cloud. And then lastly is analytics. Okay, so those are the four basic structures or features that are part of the Azure cloud computing infrastructure. And from there, we'll take a look a little bit at some of the more detailed aspects of each of the things in terms of the computing and networking and so on. And as we go through, there's a couple of things we'll point out in terms of sort of what the infrastructure looks like. And when we get to the end of the slideshow, we'll just do a quick tour. We'll go into an Azure subscription and give you a quick tour of what Azure looks like from an administrative point of view. And so you can sort of, where things are located and so on. So cloud computing comes primarily in two forms. There are public clouds, which is things like Microsoft Azure and those sorts of technologies. And there are also private clouds, which are ones that are internally hosted by you. Now, I've been in computing. So I started playing with computers when I was in grade 2, and I'm now 50. I literally have been in the IT industry for 34 years. And to me, the idea of cloud computing is this idea of client-server or server-client computing structure. So it goes all the way back to the old mainframe days. And really what cloud computing has done is taken the infrastructure that you would normally put into your local data centers and all of the power that it consumes and air conditioning that it would require and electrical sources and security and fire suppression and all that sort of stuff is taken out of your having to manage and is now put in somebody else's responsibility, in this case being Microsoft's. Microsoft has several different dedicated data centers around the world that you purchase space in, for lack of a better term, and that is where you will do all of your computing from. One of the things that when I do Microsoft seminars, and I actually go and do some of the Ignite conferences and stuff, one of the trivia questions that I ask people is, can you tell me where most of the cloud is? And it usually brings up some interesting, facial expressions, and you think about it, well, cloud must be in the sky. But in actual fact, the majority of what we call the cloud exists under the oceans. It's in fiber optic transmission cables that run along the bottoms of the oceans across the world. So the cloud is not actually something that's up in the air, even though that's how it's projected. The cloud is really all sorts of telecommunications systems that are interconnected with each other around the world, mostly through fiber optic cables around between the oceans and between the continents. But public clouds are owned by a cloud provider, a service hoster, or service provider. There's a number of different methods or terminologies that people have. And basically they're there to just provide you the resources and services to be able to do computing on a daily basis, whether it is databases or just standard file shares, maybe it's email, maybe it's the Office suite, any of those sorts of things. But those are providers that provide some sort of a resource for users. All of these resources are accessed securely over the internet via a secure network connection. So when you connect to Azure or you connect to a service in Azure, you're going to be connecting using an SSL certificate-based connection, so using HTTPS. And that way you have automatic encryption of the data and communications between you and the Azure platform that you're being connected to. Private cloud is slightly different. Private cloud is the idea of cloud service computing, which is a lot of self-service configurations and so forth for servers and desktops and whatnot. But you manage the infrastructure. So all of that infrastructure is hosted by you. You have to pay for the hardware. You have to pay for the software licenses and all that sort of stuff. Plus, you also have to have the staff to maintain it. And so without that that level of infrastructure internally, you can't actually run your own private cloud. So private clouds, again, are owned and operated by the organization that uses those resources. Okay, they will actually manage it in their data center, which includes all of the other things that go with it. And all of the self-serve access to computing resources is provided only to users that exist within your organization. You cannot share any of those resources out to other organizations. The one drawback between the public cloud and the private cloud is that in the public cloud, if you're willing to pay for it, you can increase resource access instantaneously, right? So if you have a server that has 16 gigs of RAM on it, but it's not quite fast enough, you need 32. If you have an on-prem private cloud, you need to go out, you need to buy the hardware, you need to have it shipped in, you need to go and turn the system offline, plug it in, make sure it works, then you bring the system back up online. In a public cloud computing, you basically just go into the system configuration and say, I want 32 gigs of RAM, and bang, it's done instantly. And now that server has 32 gigs of RAM. You don't need to reboot it. You don't need to do anything else. It's just done. And so it makes it a lot more efficient to be able to administer and manage the public side of things. Hybrid clouds, same idea. It's just a combination of the two. So a lot of organizations that have internal data centers, when they start going and moving towards a public cloud infrastructure, so they're going into the Azure system, will quite often have a hybrid implementation. So they still have resources on their local environments at their data centers, but over time, those resources will get slowly moved over into the cloud, and that infrastructure internally will be decommissioned. And so it sort of takes the best of both worlds because it has the on-premise security of you owning your own interface and equipment, but it gives you the capability and accessibility of the public side of things, plus the lack of cost in terms of space and power and all that sort of fun stuff as well. So just a quick comparison in terms of the differences between clouds. A public cloud, again, there's no capital expenditure. So as far as your CapEx budgets are concerned, what you would normally have spent to purchase hardware and purchase equipment for your local data center can now go from being a capital expense to an operational expense. And so, of course, your budget bylines will end up having to change. But ultimately, you're still spending the same amounts of money. It's just how you're spending the money is different, and the value that you're getting for it, I believe, is better in a cloud-based solution, especially a public cloud solution. Pardon me. And also, it's much quicker to provision and deprovision things as required. So as I mentioned before, if you need to increase the RAM on a server, or you need to add another server to a cluster or whatnot, you can do that almost instantaneously, or just as easily, you can decommission something from the system as well, almost instantaneously. So it's very simple to be able to control how much of any resource you're utilizing at any given time at any given rate. And as it says, it's probably most importantly, you only pay for what you use, right? Now, if you could say that for a piece of hardware, that would be great. So you can't go out and buy a brand new fancy server for say $25,000 and say, well, I only want to pay for 9 because I'm only using 30% of the capacity of that server. It doesn't work that way. But in the cloud-based public cloud solution, you only pay for what you use. So if you're only using 20% of a system, then you only pay for that 20%. On a private cloud, again, everything is purchased as a startup, so your capital expenses are still quite large. There are no operational expenses other than maybe day-to-day administration. But the advantage is that you have complete control over your resources and the security around those resources, whether it's physical security or computer-based security or what have you. And then, of course, the hybrid, most flexible, and takes control of both. And also, if you are in a certain situation where you have very specific legal requirements, let's say that you're in a company that does trading and all that sort of stuff, then you'll need to make sure that you have control over the data. And in a hybrid scenario, that gives you a good level of control as well. So what are some of the ideas behind cloud? Like, why do we want to do this? Some places are very old school in how they decide to manage their infrastructure. So when you have you know, a large organization that spends a lot of money on infrastructure for servers and server management and that sort of stuff, a lot of companies like the idea of being able to go down to a server room and saying, I own that, I bought that, I can touch it, I can feel it, it's mine, right? You can't do that the same with a cloud system. But I believe that over time, you will see that the benefits of using the cloud domain structure are going to be more advantageous to your organization than using an on-premise implementation. So benefits of the cloud. So one of the benefits that we have for cloud computing is high availability. So if you've ever been in a situation where you have lost data, as an example. So if somebody goes in and deletes a file, right? So in theory, if you're using an on-premise system, you are responsible for making sure that the data is backed up, that you have access to that backup, that you may have extended backups that need to be stored off-site. So you need to have some sort of tape backup mechanism that you can put that information in. And then if 6 or 8 months down the road, somebody goes, oh my God, I deleted a file, I need it because it's the year-end budget, then you're going to have to go find out what tape it's on through whatever management tool you have, and then you'll have to get the tape, figure out where it is, and then you have to mount it, and then you have to figure out which file it is and how it's going to, it's a real pain, right? If you're using cloud computing, you get the benefits of high availability right from the start. You don't have to worry about doing any tape backups or extended storage or any of that other sort of stuff because the systems will get backed up for you online. The other thing is that when you set up a cloud computing infrastructure, so you pick a data center when you first sign up. So I'm going to go create a new server that's going to be a file server, and so I set it up to be hosted in US West. Okay, so US West is the primary data center, but all of the data centers, all of the physical locations of data centers have backups associated to them. So if US West's main data center goes offline, US West 2 is the backup for that, or US East 2 is the backup for that. And so the systems will automatically be replicated so that you can receive them. Very rarely, and I mean incredibly rarely, will it ever be that you would never be able to connect to an Azure portal or an Azure service because a data center itself, the entire data center went offline. I mean, those things are pre-built in such a way that you could drop a nuclear bomb on them. They have enough power sources and enough internet sources and so forth, so that you should never have to worry about any availability to your resources. So this would include things like traditional clustering. So where you use a clustered system for fault tolerance and that sort of stuff. All of those features are still available in the public cloud. Scalability. Between ease of creation of resources, the scalability of resources is probably the biggest advantage to using cloud computing. If you're in an organization that needs to increase resources available at any point in time, then the scalability that are built into the Azure platform will be kind of right up your alley. So as an example, let's say that you're a company that does online retail. And of course, the big day is coming. Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, is coming, and so you are expecting that you are going to have a really high level of sales that day online, and so you need to make sure that you have sufficient infrastructure in place to be able to handle that load. Right? If you have an on-premise data center, it would be much more difficult to scale out your infrastructure to handle that load for those couple of days. But with using cloud resources, you can scale up and scale out resources almost on a flash, right? So if you get into the day, Cyber Monday as an example, and you find out that you're getting 3 times as much network traffic as you were expecting, you can, on the fly, add extra servers to a server cluster or increase the network traffic balance so that you can handle all of that situation. And then 3 days after the Cyber Monday is over, and you don't need those resources anymore, you can scale your systems back to where they were prior to that particular date. And it can all be done on the fly. You don't need to go through and shut networks off and shut systems down and disable all sorts of stuff. It's just you basically go shut it off and you're done. And you just decommission the use of those resources so that then you go back to an original state. So scalability is probably, I'd say, probably the single biggest advantage that most organizations find, especially if they're doing any sort of online sales, retail, any of that sort of thing. Global reach, obviously, the cloud is not just the United States or not just North America or not just Europe. It can go from anywhere, which means as an employee, I, in theory, could be working from anywhere in the world. My current full-time job is as a pre-sales engineer and advisor for Dynamics 365 as part of my day-to-day routine, and not so much since COVID, of course, but I do travel a fair amount. And the nice thing is that I make them all working holidays. So I will go and spend a week in Spain, and I will work during the day, and then I can do out and tour around Spain in the evenings and the weekends. Or I can go and spend a week in Germany or wherever it wants to be. But because of the fact that we are using cloud computing as our infrastructure, I could be sitting anywhere in the world. And as long as I have a fast, stable internet connection, it would be the same to my company as if I was sitting at a desk at King's Cross Station in downtown London, right? So there's no difference to them as to where I am. Now, until such time as our lovely friend COVID goes away, then I'm kind of restricted to staying at home, and I'm not technically supposed to be traveling places. But my boss and I have an agreement that what he doesn't hear, he won't know. so I've been doing a few little jumps here and there. Agility, again, this goes along with scalability, right? The systems are agile in the sense that they can handle loads, they can handle other sorts of situations that might come up. So you don't have to worry about it being very static and very unyielding in terms of the ability to work in the systems. Disaster recovery, big, huge issue. Disaster recovery, the data loss is another issue. But disaster recovery, of course, being that, if I do need to go back and undo something that happened, or if I do have a massive systems failure, I still have information there. So as an example, if I'm using an on-premise data center, chances are I'm probably paying for a secondary data center that has the same level of hardware, the same level of network interface, and all that other sort of stuff. So I'm basically paying twice as much for stuff that if I was using a cloud implementation, I would only need to pay for once. Okay. So I've known organizations also that the way that they do their disaster recovery makes a little sense. So, as an example, they'll have two data centers, but they'll be at the other opposite ends of the building. Well, that's all well and good in the sense that the data centers are physically separated, maybe by a quarter of a mile, but they're still in the same building. So if the power goes out, you're losing power to both centers. Or if you're going to pay for a third-party storage location, you're also not only paying for the hardware that you have to purchase, but you also have to pay the rental fees for where you're putting it in, the network traffic, the power, the cooling, and all that sort of stuff as well. So by putting it in the cloud, you get all of that features of disaster recovery. You can recover data, you have versioning of data, you have extended storage of data, but you only have to pay for one instance of stuff. You don't have to pay for multiple instances of the same pieces of hardware and so forth. Fault tolerance. Fault tolerance is sort of along the lines of high availability in the sense that if a system goes offline or if something goes down, that the system itself, the cloud background infrastructure itself, knows that I need to now run this particular virtual machine or this service or whatever from this system over here rather than the one it was on because it's overloaded or it's gone offline or the network has got down or something of that nature. It's elastic in the sense that, again, it has that capability to grow. Customer latency capabilities. One of the things that is a bit of a problem with some organizations is data latency in terms of how quickly can you get responses back. With the cloud computing system, you have almost instantaneous ability to get updates of data. So as long as your network connection is working, and as long as you have a stable internet connection, there's very little that you have to worry about in terms of latencies. Predictive costs. This is the other thing that's kind of important about cloud computing, is that when you have an on-premise infrastructure, you don't really know exactly how much it's going to cost every month, right? And the meaning by that is like, okay, so as an example, let's say that you need to pay your power consumption, you need to pay for your cooling consumption, you need to pay for your fire suppression, and so forth. Power bills fluctuate, cooling costs fluctuate based on power consumption, heat generation, temperature outside, all that sort of stuff. And so you never have a consistent price month to month to month that you can say exactly how much it's going to cost you. You might be able to say, okay, well, last year that chassis for a blade server cost me, $54,000. Oh, it went up by 12%. Oh crap! Now I got to pay another, 60. This year I got to pay $67,000 or something of that nature because the cost went up or down. So there's no predictive cost availability. With cloud computing, whatever the price is that you negotiate is the price that you pay, unless you've increased your cost based on utilization requirements or increase of resources and so forth. But ultimately, from day one how much your bill is going to be on a monthly basis. And so you have that predictive cost availability that makes budgeting a lot easier. And then lastly, security. People tend to think that because it's in the public cloud, that it's less secure than if it would be on a normal network internally. And that's just not the case. There are so many different security considerations and implementations that Microsoft just put into the Azure platform that it's staggering. So they support security requirements and management systems for probably 90% of the countries in the world. They support things like GDPR out of the box, HIPAA out of the box, personalized data management, all sorts of different things. They're all ISO standards and whatnot. So from a security point of view, I have never actually heard of any type of security breach by any hacker trying to get into a system that Microsoft runs. The only example that I've ever heard of was actually because of a third-party tool that Microsoft had purchased to use, and that third-party company didn't know that they had been hacked, and I think you know what I'm referring to, and it then had a downstream impact to multiple users. But in that case, it was something that was done by a third-party vendor, not actually by the Microsoft system itself.
Value of certification and how companies and individuals view this. And this is very true. Cloud is accelerating the skills gap. Every time, every day, companies, Microsoft adds new features in Azure, right? What we're going to see in the next few months may be different with all the advancements that Microsoft is adding. In fact, this is actually an old slide, but this is very true. And the more advancements are added, the more the gap is widening. So it's very important that we are paying attention and getting the right education for us, whether we're individual, starting on a role in cloud, or you have employees that needs to do this. Also, what are the benefits? So for an employee, stand out, right? Get recognized. That this is one validation because we have a tangible number associated with it. And as they say, if you're certified, you earn more. And it also advances your career, whether you're currently in the market for a new job or you want to get better at your current job. Definitely certification would help. And for the companies, this is something that most C levels appreciate that it can help them with talent identification. Nowadays, the way we're being, the hiring uh, is being done, it puts a great deal in the certification of the candidate. Also, for current teams that have certified members, they can see that the team produces 20% more. And to the business, it has this huge impact that if you have a huge percentage of certified candidates, then your team gives a better overall impact. Okay. Now, what makes Microsoft certifications valuable? First and foremost, in terms of market share, as we all know, Microsoft is that dominant technology in the market. There are others, but Microsoft has grown its base and it is a market share leader. It is first and foremost, the certification is aligned to relevant job roles. So as you saw earlier, we have certifications for cloud administrators, for cloud developers. It demonstrates that you know how to apply your skills in the real world, and it is a verified achievement. So you can't just say that, hey, I took the training, but you can say that I really know this, I have the skills because I am certified. Now, aside from that, as I said earlier, it is aligned to market opportunity. What is the market looking for? So whatever Microsoft has, definitely they have the certification to match it. And these are very critical skills to make your digital transformation successful. And Microsoft continues to update this. And we can have a whole lot of discussion, discussing about how easy it would be to maintain your certification. And also, Microsoft puts a great deal that all the Microsoft certified professional renews their certification every year just by upskilling themselves. There are more information on Microsoft Learn, and we can definitely explain that to you as well. Just contact us back. And just looking into the kind of questions you're getting from the exam, these are skill-based questions. Gone are the days when you're going through multiple questions and you can guess it. Nope, can't do that anymore. Also, it requires experience, and you know how to apply those skills. And hands-on labs are also included in the exam. It's we don't want to scare you that it's difficult, but it really demonstrates that you have the skills if you pass the exam. You can also shout out to the world your recognition. You can add it in your LinkedIn profile, and this actually also solidifies your role in your current employment, or if you're looking for work, then this really helps you to land that job that you want. Okay. So just a few more stats here. 91% of certified IT pros says certification gives them the credibility. 93% of decision makers agree that this has a lot of added value, and 52% says that this expertise is more sought after within their organization. This is just an example. Since we discussed since we discussed an intro to AZ 900, these are the kinds of skills that are measured. And I'd like to just go quickly to our website. This is our website. You can just go to Microsoft to check out other resources that we have here, such as the role-based certification path. This gives you an idea on what are the different certification and training, and these are all links to the actual courses, so you can read the outline. Another thing is, if you are you're representing a company, there are several ways to purchase training. We have our NetCom Unlimited, which provides you with 12 months unlimited access to more than 500 virtual instructor-led training. or you have our learning passport, or you can just go to our schedules. If you're one person and you want an open enrollment, you just can look for the different schedules that we have available for you.